So I'm here on the River Wye today, and this is my first time out with these ground baits. And as I said earlier, I've looked for the right mixes, talked to people, and it seems like the Gardon's record is going to be sort of form the base of most of my mixes on here. I've got the Big River Bream and I've got the Secret. I think the Secret I'm going to have to be careful with. I think if you overdo the Secret, I might make it too sticky. But I'm desperate to get a little bit of sweetness in there as well. So the Big River, I'm going to put half a bag of that, and 2 kilos of the Gardon's record. So this is my first time opening a bag of this, so I'm looking forward to the smell sensation. So straight away as that's pouring out, I can see some big particles in that ground bait, which tells me straight away that's going to be a mix that's going to have weight to it, but also have good binding capabilities. When you have big particles in a ground bait, you know, when they take up that moisture, they're very easy to sort of mold together. And smell wise, oh yeah, there's a familiarity, a sort of a Van den Eynde familiarity about that. But yeah, very much a mix with, I can see a few bits of like probably maize and things like that, and biscuity bits, and just everything you sort of would want to see in a natural mix. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just add a little bit of the Bream, the Gold Pro Bream. Yeah, straight away, just like breamy flavours, just, I don't know, brassy, you know, caramelly, I don't know, but it smells lovely anyway. I'm going to just put half a bag in. And this is purely just a personal thing. No one's told me to do this, but I'm just intrigued. I love those sorts of smells in my ground bait. And then the Secret, and I know from previous experience with Secret, it is sticky and you can overdo it. So I'm just going to put half a bag of this in. Again, totally different smell, this one. So just put half a bag, about half a kilo of that. And then there's lots of particles, but it feels like a mix that when I add water, that's going to bind up and give me the sort of mix that I need to attack this river and to deliver lots of bait and particles to the bottom. Okay, so I've got my 3 ingredients in there now, and I say all hopefully will add a little bit of something to the mix. So I'm just going to give it a whiz round before I add water, just to make sure everything's distributed evenly. And now we'll get some water into it. So as with with every bit of mixing ground bait, you don't want to overdo it too early, but I know I can put a fair bit in the mix like that. So I'm just going to put in about 1.5 pints of water to start and give that a mix round. So that first bit of water has just sort of dampened it down. You know, it's already forming. You can already feel the sort of binding qualities of all those ground baits together. But obviously I need to get some water into there and get those particles absorbing. So a bit more water. Again, it's my first time mixing this, so I don't want to go too gung-ho and ruin it. But hopefully over a period of time you get used to a ground bait and you can usually do it in 2 applications. And I'm going to give it one more application of water. And now it feels like it's getting to sort of the consistency you want. You know, that's going to bind really well, but obviously there's still a lot of absorption to go on here. So what I do now is give it the quick one on the drill. And that takes out all of those lumps and leaves you with the mix you want. Now, usually probably 5-10 minutes to make sure all that absorption has gone on, and probably have to add one last little bit of application of water, but that's pretty much, you know, that's going to go as it is now. That feels to me like a Wye mix. So there we go, that's been about 15 minutes I've left that, and that's held its moisture pretty well, in all fairness. I'm just going to add that last little drop. There's always that bit, you don't want to overdo it, but it just needs that last finishing touch. So I'm just going to give it just a touch, one last whiz, try and keep the leaves out, And now you can see, just you know, I've not squeezed that at all, but you can see the way that forms and what that's going to do. You know, I can add all my particles to that, and away we go. Now, one thing I've not done today, and something I will be doing, you know, as the sort of autumn and winter progresses, you know, we get heavier flows. You've got to add a bit of soil. So I've got, you know, we've got these different soils, which I'm looking forward to using these. This is a heavy soil, and that's just a real dark, heavy soil. And I can feel, you know, probably adding 1 part of that to 2 parts groundbait is going to be probably perfect in the winter. I'm not going to do it today because we're on a shallower section here, and I just want to feel the groundbait, how it works. But there's lots of different things, lots of different additives that Van den Eynde do that I can sort of play around with in the coming months. But for now, I'm just going to go with the mix. But at some point, you know, in not too long, when we get bigger flows, the soil is definitely going to come into the mix. Okay, so I have now added lots of hempen casters to my mix, and that's worked out perfectly. It's, you know, you can see it just going to carry a lot of particles, and that's what you know, a lot of this is about with groundbait choices. Can I deliver big amounts of particles to the riverbed and disperse that and get those fish sat on top of my groundbait? And that mixes up lovely. So I'm going to mix up 7 balls, lucky 7, and see what response we get. Obviously loose feeding is a big part of what we do as well in this river, but to start with I just want to see what settles over that groundbait. So I'm going to put 7 balls in and start fishing and see what response we get. Obviously a lot of the fishing we do here is about getting the fish as close as you can to you up the flow, and fishing, catching them on pole to hand, and you know, so you can catch quickly. But I really want to start by putting these balls out in the flow and fishing with a stick float and just running over it and just getting an idea of where the fish settle, whether they settle right on top of where the balls have landed, whether they're 10 yards down, and just get a feel for what's going on. Later on, I've got a pole set up. I'd like to catch them on pole to hand as well, but to start with, I just want to see what reaction I get out in the flow and see how those fish respond to it. So I've got my 7 balls, so I'm just going to throw those in now. Make a lovely sound as they hit the water. Sounds like a proper Wye groundbait. There we go. So straight away I know those, you know, the feel of the groundbait, I know those are hitting the bottom quite quickly in the area I want them to, and now it's a case of what response we get from the fish. You get that? Okay, so we've been fishing about half an hour now, and had a great run of fish to start with, as you'd expect, but it's carried on, and I've started, it's a little chub, that one. I've started putting a ball of ground bait in now every other cast, after the initial feed of 7 balls. And the fish are right on top of it. They are so right on top of the ground bait, exactly what I wanted. And the things I read from that are, one, that they like the ground bait, which is key. But 2, that the ground bait is going to the bottom. And I would say, you know, it is staying in, you know, it is hitting the bottom in complete form, and the fish are coming right on top of it. So the ground bait isn't breaking down quickly, otherwise I would have fish, you know, spread all over the place. So it's very controlled in the way we're doing it. And the fishing is phenomenal. Dace, mainly dace with a few chub like that, but fish that you can really put a weight together and give yourself a chance of winning or framing in the match. But the key is now is we are very much in control of where the bait is landing. Just 1 ball every other cast at the moment. It seems to be plenty, and it's a bite every cast. And if I miss a bite, the way I'm fishing, I can let it run and hopefully get a second bite at the cherry, like that. It is just phenomenal fishing. And the plan really will be, as it would be in a competition, is that I would, you know, these fish are very much on my bait now, on my ground bait, and I can maneuver those fish around. So hopefully, in a while, I will start feeding a closer line to me, and then I've got the pole to hand set up. I've got 7 meters to hand set up, and I can start catching them on a pole, because in match conditions, that would catch you the quickest. You know, being able to fish pole to hand rather than casting further out is going to give you the best chance of doing the biggest weight. But at the moment, we're just in a nice rhythm, catching a fish virtually every cast. The ground bait is working, the fish are hungry, and it's hard to imagine a more enjoyable day's fishing. That is a big dace, that one. Ooh. You could really put a weight together of those. Well, this is fantastic fishing now. We're catching a fish every cast, either a big dace, a chub or an odd roach. And it's phenomenal fish. Nice roach there, look, that's what we like, catching those. Just about small enough to swing. What a beautiful fish. Beautiful roach. But the fish are very much, they're right on top of our feed, right where our ground bait's landing. You know, I've not been loose feeding at all. I've just been feeding balls of ground bait every other run through. But I feel confident now that they're so on that bait that I could probably catch them on the pole. Now, I could carry on fishing like this with this lovely strung out stick float and catch a fish every cast, and it'd be wonderful. But you're a competition angler, you want to catch as quick and as efficiently as you can. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get them to come closer on the pole. So I've got bait out there, I've not fed anything here, but what I'm going to do is just feed 3 balls, not big balls, just 3 balls closer in, and see if they come over our pole line. So I'm just going to put 3 balls, not just to create that new sort of hot spot, if you like. Hopefully, I mean, that's not too far away from our float line, and I've been feeding a little bit closer. You know, I've been sort of edging a little bit closer, and I can see the fish are following. So hopefully now it won't take long before we can catch on the pole. So I've got this set at 8 metres to hand, and you know, hopefully I can come even shorter than that. But 8 metres is a good sort of transition point to switch over from catching on float tactics to on the running line. So just going to swing that out, drop it over that sort of area where that bait's just gone, and just run it through and see. Oh, might have been a bite, might have just dragged under. I haven't run this rig through yet, so. And you can do this in a number of ways. You can sort of build up to this. You can start dropping, and you know, I've just put 3 balls in there to try and kick-start it straight away. But I could have been feeding an odd ball shorter as I was fishing out there to sort of get them ready to go. But I just want to see, I'm just confident the fish are just so on the bait that they should come onto this relatively quickly. Oh, that was a bite. Just felt the fish then. There we go. Nice roach to start. So there you go, straight away the fish have come straight onto that pole line. And now you can, you know, in a competition scenario, you know, you would hope that you can catch one. If you can catch one every cast on the pole to hand, then you can really put a weight together. So now it's just a case of seeing if we can hold them there in that area and catching quickly. You know, and this is really targeted fishing now. You know, we're literally really condensing them in an area. So it'll just be a case of just making sure the rig's right, you know, making sure, because I've gone from fishing a strung out rig on the stick float to an Olivet rig, which might just be a little bit, the bites might be a bit different, and I might just have to change the rig around to make sure I'm hitting every bite, or as many bites as possible. There we go, there's another one. Interesting, the first 2 fish have been roach. On the stick float it was predominantly dace, but whether that's just a positioning thing, maybe the roach want to cling closer to this bank, or maybe it's presentation, I don't know. But the main thing is I've made that transition from stick float on the running line to pole to hand, and I'm catching. That feels a decent fish. Nice big dace that is. Ooh. Could have almost netted that one. That is a big chunky dace, that one. And interestingly, it's full of groundbait. So they're definitely right on top of it. And you don't actually have to feed a ball every cast. Every other cast is plenty because, you know, they're not, you still want the competition for feed there. Yes, this is how you'd want it in a competition, isn't it? Well, there we go, another dace, one of many, and I think that'll do us for the day. What a fabulous little session of fishing. A real sort of tryout of the ground baits and mixes, and they've done exactly what I wanted them to do. I wanted to understand how much bait they'll take, how many particles, where the fish sit on top, and they've sat right on top of it today. And then I've been able to manoeuvre them into place to catch on a pole to hand as well. So ultimate straight away confidence in the mixes I've used. I couldn't have asked for better, really. Unfortunately, I made a bit of a mess of my new jumper, but let's hope there's plenty more dirty jumpers to come. Well, what a beautiful bag of fish on an autumn day on a river in near perfect condition with some very good ground bait, I think. So happy with that. Proper little workout. Let's get these back.